All right, hello everybody. Today we are going to get back into some UE4. And today what we're going to be going over is how to create a little soccer game. The goal of this is to begin to understand some interactions between blueprints, sending some custom events back and forth, and some of the most basic things that we didn't cover last week that we're going to start building on sort of what we did last week. And so first I'm going to show you guys sort of what we're going to be creating today. So we're going to be creating a little soccer game using the third person like basic blueprint. If you saw when the game began, the score printed in the top left. I can, run around. I can kick this ball. It'll tell me when I kicked it, and then also print the score in the top left every single time I score. I have a home goal and an away goal. Oop, hit the goal post there. So you can see the score prints 1-1 right now. And I can also hold the shift button and then kick the ball to, sort of lob it instead of just letting it sort of kick normally. And there I kick the ball really high, and then I'm going to kick it in, and that you see it's 2-2. But now when I score, you'll see that the game sort of will reset, and that's sort of the final thing. You see in the top left, it'll say home team wins, new game over, and then new game. So that way there are a couple events that we can call, and that you could then fill in whatever you sort of want to do. So that's what we're going to be creating today, using the third-person blueprint and some physics. So I'm just gonna close this one, and here is how we're going to begin. So if you open the third person blueprints sort of tab, or like if you open the default third person blueprint um, like game that we opened or map that we opened last week. In here, there's going to be some things that I have deleted. I deleted the like staircase thing that was in here, and I deleted, there were some words on the ground. But other than that, I've just deleted those aspects that were in here, and then I rebuilt the lighting. To make it nice and clean. So if you delete those objects, what you'll see on the ground is some baked in shadows. And then all you have to do is come up here to this build button. What that will do is take into account all of the scene geometry, and it will bake any of your static lights, which by default, this is a stationary light, so this takes baked lighting, and all of these objects are static, which means that they will have their light baked onto them in a texture, which is why you can see this is kind of a crappy shadow right here. And so when you bake your lighting again, those shadows will sort of disappear. So this is going to be the base of this entire project. Again, I'm going to be uploading a step-by-step guide on how to do this, as well as this tutorial, so that should be pretty easy to do. But again, all I did was create a new project with a third-person template, make sure it says blueprints and everything like it did last week. I deleted the items that were in the arena, and then I baked the lighting. So that's kind of all that we've done so far. So what's the first step that we need to do? Well, I'm going to make a blueprint actor called BP goals. And I'm going to open that up, and that will open here like this. And what I'm going to do is create our goals out of some really basic geometry. And I'm just going to add a component, and I'm going to go up here to cube. And I'm going to scale that down. And then I'm going to bring it up a little bit, make it a little taller, something like that. And then I'm going to pop this blueprint into the scene. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I want this to be plopped in, and then I'm going to change these locations to 0, 0, and 0. We can see that that's in the ground, so we don't want that. We're just going to pop that right back up. Yeah, right, something like that, where it's in the ground so that the collisions happen correctly. And then now I can sort of see, as I'm editing in this window, I can see in real time over in this other window sort of where those objects are. So I'm going to pop that up a little bit, and what I'm creating here is the goalposts for our game. And then I'm going to slide that all the way kind of down and back. And as you can see, this kind of works like a little goalpost. Yeah, something like that. It's probably good. Doesn't look like our 0, 0 is in the right position in the world, but doesn't matter because this is not a real game. So first I'm going to rename that. I'm going to rename that, let's just call this SM underscore home for the home goal, and then I'm going to do left post like that. Now I'm going to duplicate that. So I'm going to hit Control W. If you right click, you can see that duplicate in Unreal is Control W. Why? I don't understand. And that was funky, so let's not do that. It probably did that because I've transformed it in here. So the way we can get around that is actually Control C and then V, and then now you can see it's like, what just happened? Well, it did what I was hoping it would do the first time. So we have two posts sort of stacked on top of each other right now, and I'm gonna double click on that. So there's a couple ways you can rename things. The first is to double click. Other way is to click on it and then click F2. I got used to doing that, so that's what I do most of the time. And then I'm gonna do this right post. And then since I zeroed out my object here, I could then just pop this into sort of world space. I can see that the X, it moves this way. Oh. Y is moving that way. X should be moving. There we go. That's what I was looking for. X moves side to side. So what I could then do is click on. Oh, I imagine you guys can't see the edge of that, could you? So the reason I want to move it in the X direction, because you can see that I'm moving it. When I move it in the X direction, this happens here. And what I'm going to do is just take the X value, and I'm just going to negate that so that it's sort of even on either side. And now I have my right post, and then I'm going to duplicate my right post, rotate it. There we go. Rotate it 90 degrees. I'm going to pop this back in the X direction to 0. I'm going to move it up a little bit. Let's see what we got. Move it up a little bit, and then scale it out. Oh, I don't know why it took both directions on that one, but look at that. Oh, okay. So what's happening there is I'm in local transformation. Or it says world, so that's weird that it's doing that. Why are you being like that, man? Sure. Okay. I'll scale you up in the Z direction. So that's being a little weird right now. Don't know exactly why that's happening. Maybe some of you out there do, but whatever. And boom. Now we have our first sort of goal. I'm going to call this up here crossbar. Oh, did you see that it was named EE like this? That means that I was trying to hit into the rotator, and for some reason I was typing there. So you might have seen that. So SM underscore home and then crossbar. So there you go. Now I can sort of, select all of these by holding Control, and then I can do C and V. Okay, let's not do C and Control. Let's duplicate. Oh, that doesn't like that either, does it? Alright, well, this is kind of live, so it happens. What I'll do is I'll just do one at a time then. So what I'll do is Control V the left post, and then I'm going to make sure that I can see the world transform, and then I'm going to take the left post, which is actually going to be renamed to be away here, and right post, because when you move it to the other side, that'll become the right post of that goal. And then I'm going to just negate the Y value. Now what happened earlier, but it looks good here, is that this is exactly where I want it to be, which is even across from this goal. So now I can just do that the same thing with the other posts. So I did the left post, and now I'm going to do the right post. I'm going to rename that away and left post, and then just negate my Y value, and that should have popped right there. And then one more for the crossbar. So Control V. I'm just going to do away and crossbar. And then we can just do that. And then I'm going to compile and save, which means that my blueprint has been saved. And now I can see that I sort of have some goals here in my scene. Sweet. So the next thing that we are going to do is create the ball. We're going to create a blueprint for the ball that is going to hold some information for us, and then later we're going to create like a ball spawner that can spawn the balls for us, and then we're going to add to the goals later to sort of understand, when the goals are hit and things like that. So the first thing that I'm going to do is create a new blueprint for the ball. I'm going to do an actor that's called BP_ball. And then I'm going to double click on that, and that will open here in my blueprint window. Let me just make sure that you guys can see that. Yes. Alright, so now we can see BP ball here. Again, this is not actually a ball, this is just an icon for a ball. So I'm going to go into here and I'm going to do a sphere. I'm going to call this SM_ball. And there we go. That is our ball. Now if we drag that out into the scene, we can see our ball here. And I'm going to drag it up a little bit. And we'll do that. So here we go. We have a sphere component here. I've named that SM_ball. And then the first thing I'm going to do is we need this to simulate physics. So how do I do that? Well, as we explained sort of last week, this is the details panel. It has a lot of information about every object in the scene. One of those things you can see here is physics. So simulating physics is as easy as clicking simulate physics and hitting compile and save, and then hitting the play button. So there you go. The ball you can see would fall, and I can sort of push that around, and there you go. You have a ball. If you have not checked that box, what will happen is when you hit the play button, nothing. It's just a wall, and my character will just walk into it. So if for some reason your ball is not working, just make sure you've got that checked. And that's all we're really going to worry about for physics right now, except we'll get into that a little later. So we're going to come back to that in a little bit, and we're going to affect some physics here. But first I want to get into some other stuff. So we've added a sphere component. We've added it to our blueprint. And now what we're going to do is generate an onComponent hit event. So if you guys remember from last week, before I was in this viewport view, and then now I'm going to click up on the top here in event graph. And I'm going to click on the ball, which opens this details panel if it wasn't already open, and then I'm going to scroll down to events, and here's a list of events that can happen pertaining to that specific like static mesh. And the top one is, you can't read it because but it says onComponent hit. So I'm going to hit that plus button. So now we have a event that will fire. So this will fire this line of code anytime this ball gets hit. One thing for that is that we need to make sure that our simulation generates hit events here. So we can click that and then hit save. So if you don't click that, this won't fire because the collision simulation will not ever fire this hit event. So we definitely want to make sure that that is checked. So now what we can do is do a print string just to make sure that that is working. And then I'm going to make this say, I've been hit. And then I can go here, and when I hit the play button, you can see I've been hit fires a bazillion times because it was hitting the ground as it was sort of settling. And then now I can sort of kick the ball, and it's still saying I've been hit because now as it's rolling, it's firing hit events. So we know that our hit event is working, so that's great. So the next thing that we want to do is we don't want this to fire every single time. Well, it's going to fire every single time, but if it's going to fire, then we need to check. We need to check what is hitting it. So we're going to use this other actor pin again. And we're going to go to get class. And then from this return value, we're going to say class is child of. And then the parent class we want to check against is our third person character. And then from this Boolean, we can pull out a branch. And then we can plug that right into the branch. So right now all the code says is onComponent hit, the ball gets hit. It's saying, hey, what was the object that hit it? What was the class? Is that class the third person character? And if and then return a boolean for that. So then we can determine what happens if true and if false. And so if true, I'm just going to say, like character. No, I can't see it. Character hit me. Now I'm going to do that, and then come down here, and then you can see that here we're getting an event that fires every single time we sort of run into the ball. You see it fires a couple times because I'm sort of like pushing the ball as I'm rolling it. But now we have an event that fires, and we kind of know when we are hitting the ball, so that we can sort of start to add sort of that like kick mechanic in. So that's pretty cool. So again, if you're a little stuck right here, all this is a new blueprint called BP ball. I've added a static mesh called SM_ball. When it comes in, it will just be called like static mesh component or something like that. And I renamed it using either double click on here, or slowly double click. There you go. And then you can either slowly sort of double click on here, but I like to press F2, and that's how you can rename things. And then we added the blueprint like this to the scene. And then we created an event by clicking on SM ball and scrolling down to the bottom, and then hitting on component hit. And then we created this event. We tested that the event was working, and it was firing every time. Because we had come in here and the simulation should generate hit events was checked yes. That's under collision. It's like, I don't know, halfway down or so. We checked that to be yes, and then we're just testing the other object that's hitting the ball, and we're saying, are you the third person character, or are you of that class? And it says yes, yes it is, and then prints the character hit it. So that's great, and we can sort of start to use this to build in our kick mechanic, which is cool. And so the way that we're going to do that is we're going to add an impulse. And so if the character kicks, we're going to add impulse to the ball. And we can see here, this is the impulse that we're going to be adding right now. Would be 0 in the x direction, 0 in the y direction, 0 in the z direction. You can say which bone specifically you want to apply the impulse to if you had a character. And then this is a velocity change versus an impulse. An impulse will take into account mass. Velocity change will not. But we're going to leave that unchecked for now. And so let's say we just want to check to make sure that that's working. We could add like a 20,000, impulse in the, no, let's do it in the z direction. Or heck, I guess we could throw it in any direction. That would be cool, huh? Yeah. All right, so let's just check to see if that's working. So when we hit the play button, we can sort of run around. We can see that the event is no longer firing as soon as the ball hits the ground. And then when I run into the ball, boop, there goes the ball. Boop. Oh, looks like I've yeeted it out of existence. But the downside to this is that every time we hit the ball, we're going to be kicking it 20,000 in the x, 20,000 in the y, and 20,000 in the z. And that's not exactly what we want, because what this is really corresponds to is a vector. And so what you have is a value in a direction. So you're asking it to hit it basically one direction every time, which we don't want unless you like the band. So what we really want is to understand, which way the character is running so that it corresponds to the character and their velocity. So what we're going to do then, what it sounds like we need, right, is a reference to the character, this character that we're going to be running around with. And once we have a reference to this character, we can get their velocity. And when this is true, we can get their velocity and use that here. So we're going to add a variable by coming down in the component, this sort of tab on the left down to here to variables. I'm going to add a variable, and I'm going to call this character reference. And then I'm going to come over here. So here you can see all the different variable, different tabs and things that we can sort of affect. And the first thing I'm going to do is we've already changed the name, and then the next thing I'm going to do is the variable type. And if I start typing in third-person character third-person character right here, you can see that I can make a reference to a third-person character. Now we can reference either the object, the class, we can do a soft object reference, or we can do a soft class reference. What we want specifically is an object reference. We want to say this specific third-person character is what we're going to be referencing. So I'm going to click on that. You can see that this has sort of changed some of the events that I can do here, but I'm going to just hit compile. And you can see that we cannot set that default value right here. So what does that mean? It means that we can't, through this drop-down menu, say specifically to target this character. What we can do, though, there's a couple ways we can sort of get around this and sort of fix that. Because if you don't actually tell it what it should be referencing, this won't actually function as a reference. So what we can do then is there's a couple ways. The first way is making this a public variable, and if we open this actually I'll show you what it looks like right now. So if I compile here and I click on the ball, you can see here are all the things that I can sort of affect. I can affect the transform, the rendering, the collision, the input, the actor. And here's some LODs and cooking, like attributes. And you don't see anything in reference to a variable. But when I open this eye and hit compile, you can now see that default appears, and what we're really looking at is sort of default values for variables. And you can see that this is going to be setting character reference. So what does that mean? It means I can now hit this drop-down menu, find third-person character. Third-person character is the name of our character here in the scene. And now this ball understands that this is the character that we are referencing. Without that, it won't understand anything, and the reference to this character won't mean anything. But now that we've sort of filled in this value, we can sort of hit compile and save here. I always just like to do that just to make sure. But now I can sort of say, hey, from this character reference, let's get the velocity. And then let's just plug that in right now to here, and that's going to be whatever the velocity of the character will be sort of, how fast it will get kicked. So you can see that it's now rolling at the velocity that I hit it at, and now it's sort of adding, and it's just kind of rolling right along. And right now I don't have to push it, I just have to sort of run into it, and it will be going the same speed as I was when I was sort of running into it. Now that's not really kicking, is it? Because we're kind of just like hitting it, and it's just going to take our velocity. So, what should we do here? Well, the fastest way we could really affect this is just multiplying this. So we could say, hey, whatever the value of, whatever we sort of want to multiply this by, we could just sort of drag out from this vector tab right here. I should have mentioned that before, but what I did here was take the velocity. So I drug out here and I typed in velocity, and then went to get velocity, which is a utility, and then out of get velocity it returns a vector, so an x, y, and z. So if I unplug this, you can see it wants a vector here because it's yellow. If you highlight it, it says impulse vector. And then x, y, and z are sort of, what we're going to be affecting. We can put in the different directions. Well, here we have an out vector of how fast our character is moving in an x, y, and z direction, which is very helpful. So now we can go here and we can sort of, multiply this. Let's do a vector times an integer, and we'll just multiply this by something ridiculous, by like 20,000. And then go to here and hit compile and save. And then now that vector coming in is going to be massive. Yeah, so there she goes flying. So what we're doing here is, taking our speed, multiplying it by a value, and then, sort of applying that to, goes flying. The cool part about this, though, is it does actually depend on which way I'm sort of, running at the ball. Like if I run at the ball this way, now I'm freaking destroying it. in whatever direction that I'm running in because I'm using the velocity as my base. And phew, oh my gosh, it went through the wall. So, now we're kicking it at like, freaking Superman strength or something like that. And so that's a little ridiculous, but now we're sort of getting that sort of kick happening, which is just sort of we've run into the ball and then we add an impulse. So that's pretty cool. But there is a little bit of a problem with this. The first is that the ball rolls endlessly because there's no friction. So let's add in a little bit of friction. And the way that we can do that is by clicking on the ball. We can go down to physics here, which is just above collision. So if you remember when we clicked on simulate generate hit events, physics is that category right above it. And again, I'm just in the BP ball blueprint, clicking on SM ball, and then right where we clicked on simulate physics at the beginning, right here we have something called angular dampening, and what this will do is sort of slow down the ball in its linear direction. And I'm just going to turn that to 1. You can sort of use this to introduce drag as sort of an element in your scene. And so now when we hit the play button, one will kick the ball really hard, but you can kind of see it's going to start slowing down and sort of come to a stop, which before it wouldn't have done because, ooh, look at that, how fast that goes. You can see the ball is kind of a little bit different at behavior now because we're introducing that drag to it, so it won't roll infinitely anymore. But there she goes. So let's just bump this down to 1,000. So that is really nice because that adds a little bit more, not necessarily realism, but it makes it nice because now when I kick the ball, I can sort of catch up to the ball. It acts as if, there's some friction happening between the ball and the ground, which is nice because now I can catch up to the ball and I'm like, all right, now I'm ready. I want to kick it this way. But this is cool now that we've sort of got this happening. But now I want to sort of start creating that shift to hit the lob button functionality. Because sometimes, maybe in your game you want to have something else be affected, or, you want to affect the way that your interactions happen based on a key press. And so that's what we're going to sort of introduce here. So what needs to happen? Well, what first needs to happen is we sort of set up the functionality of some sort of way of determining that the key is pressed, and then we need to, once we know the key is pressed, figure out a way then to implement that into our ball so that we understand, that the key is pressed and we're adding an impulse, and sort of how do we affect this value coming out. And so the first, where we're going to start then is in third person character, because we need to go to where our inputs are being taken in. And we can see here, this is where our movement is sort of being taken in, our gamepad and our mouse and jump and everything is being taken in here. So this is where we're sort of controlling our character and sort of the things that pertain to our character. And this is where we're going to add our shift functionality to lob the ball. So I'm going to right click in the blueprint space, and I'm going to type in shift. Now you can see there's left shift and right shift. So I'm going to start with the left one. And when it's pressed, I want to, so I started with this sort of already made, but this is what your blueprint will look like. It will not have any, it will just have these two variables, and we're going to create a new variable that is called, let's call it loft boost. And this is a variable that when we hit the compile, we can see that the default value is going to be off. And then when we come into here to our left shift, we want to set our loft boost. So I right click, or sorry, not right click. I can left click on loft boost and drag it into the scene. And then when I do that and drag it over and in, I can get or set. And here I'm going to want to set this value. So I'm going to, when I press the shift key, set the loft boost to true. And I'm just going to copy this by copy and pasting. And then on release, I'm going to set it to false. So now we know that the shift is pressed or shift is not pressed. And now we got to do the same thing for the right shift. Oh gosh. I just hit the controller off my lap. So right shift. And we're just going to do that same thing. I literally just copy and pasted these. I'm just going to do when it's pressed and when it's not pressed. It's probably going to be the left one that gets pressed at any time because, I use WASD, so I just can hit the shift button with my pinky. But if you were, say, using the arrow keys to run around, you could use that right shift as well. So this is good to note that there is some difference between a left and a right shift in UE4. But that's really all we need here. So now we can understand, when the shift button is pressed, and we can set that with a variable, which is cool. And then now I'm going to go back into BP ball. So how are we going to access that information coming in from that character? Well, what we can do now is we've already set up, our character reference here, right? So what we can do then is just get a reference to our character again. You could use the same one, but for simplicity's sake, our project's not going to get that complicated, so it's okay to have more than one reference. I'm going to drag this off, and I'm going to say get loft, and then there you go. We can see that our variable here is get loft boost, or that was our option. So now what we have is a reference to the character, and now we also have a reference to the variable from that character. And then what we can do then is branch in here. And we can determine, the first true is that the character was sort of kicked the ball. And then this is going to determine whether or not we can add boost to the ball. And so from that, what we're going to do is create a new variable called loft boost value. That way we can differentiate between the two. And I'm going to make that an integer. The reason I'm going to make that an integer is because it's going to be a whole value. It doesn't need to be point something or whatever. And the default value is going to be 0. And so if it is true that the loft boost is pressed, so if shift is pressed, I'm going to come here and I'm going to plug in that I'm going to set the value of loft boost value to, let's do 10,000. And then if it's not true and that variable or that boolean is not being, or that shift button is not being pressed, I'm going to set this to 0. So you might be saying, geez, well now, cool, we have a nice variable here, but what are we going to do with that? Well, first what we're going to do is make sure that both of these wind up at the same place, which is adding an impulse. But then what we're going to do is down here is we're going to come in and affect our actual, sort of how we're determining the velocity down here. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the vector that I've multiplied, and I'm going to type in break vector. And then what this allows me to do is break that 3 vector down into its x, y, and z components. So now I have an individual x, individual y, and individual z. And I'm going to drag out the z, and I'm going to hit the plus. And then I'm going to do float plus a float. And then I'm going to take loft boost value. It's going to convert it to a float real fast, which is this node. That's just going to convert between an integer and a float. And then from here, I'm going to type in make vector, just like that, make vector. And then I do not want it to be into the x, so I'm going to break that connection. So you could either go like that, or you could, so you could either click the Alt button and left click to get rid of it, or if this is in the x position, I could hit Control and then drag that over down to the z. So again, that's you could either Alt and click, and that breaks that connection, or you could hit Control and then drag down to the z, and then now that's the z value. The reason that we're adding the loft boost value to the z is that in UE4, z is the up direction, so that's going to add an extra little boost upward. And then I'm going to go to the y and then the x, and now I can drag all these back over a little bit. Now I'm going to take this resulting vector into the impulse here. So what do we have? We have a reference to the character, their velocity. We're going to multiply that by 1,000, which we set up before because that was a good value for our kick. then we're going to come here to break the vector into its x, y, and z components. And then I'm only going to affect the z because I'm going to add this loft value. So if my key is pressed, this value will be 10,000, and if it is not pressed, it will be 0. And then I'm going to add that to whatever z value I was going to have before. I'm going to make a vector and then plug that right out into impulse. And if this is 0, then obviously it's going to add 0. If it's 10,000, it'll add 10,000. And now when we go back and in, we will be able to, run and kick our ball. You can see there that it's just kicking normally. And then if I hold the shift button, alright, well, that doesn't look like it's working. So let's figure out why it's not working. Let's go back to our third person character. I have that compiled and saved, and then I'm going to do a print statement here. So this is the way I debug stuff if it's not working. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to print in. I had yeah boy before, so this means that we could do that, or you could put in whatever you want, but boost set. Or we could say, how about, let's change that actually to boost exclamation point, and then we'll do this, and we shall do no boost, and then a sad face because boost is fun. Great. I'm going to just copy and paste that down here, drag these over, and so now what we should be able to see is that when we hit the play button and I hit the shift button, I can see boost and then let go, no boost, boost, no boost, boost, no boost. So we know that that's working, so perhaps our value is just a little low. I did type in 100,000 in my notes, but I thought that seemed a little high, but let's just add a 0 in here and see what happens. Alright, let's hit the play button. I can see that it says boost and no boost, so I'm going to hit the boost and then boop, and you can see that it flies up. So it was right, I was right with 100,000, I'm just a dummy. So we just run into the ball. We can see that nothing happens. It just kicks it the way that we expect it to. And then we see it slows down. That's nice, so I can get around it. And I'm going to hold the shift button, and it says boost, and it flies up a little bit. So there you go. That's how we can sort of create that sort of shift mechanic of, you can kick the ball up or you could kick the ball down. That's kind of nice. So that way we can lob it over those defenders. I don't know if anybody plays FIFA, but there you go. There's lob. So boop. Smoked that one. Alright, great. So now we have sort of passed, oh, hello. We had sort of passed a variable between blueprints, which is cool. And that is sort of, our, ball sort of kicking mechanic, which is awesome. But now what we're going to do is set up the ball to actually be spawnable. Why is this not spawnable? Well, the reason is that if you remember what I was talking about before with the character reference being a public variable, that has to be set manually over here in the details panel. And if we spawn the ball through a blueprint, then we cannot manually set that through the details panel because the game's going to be playing. So can we sort of affect this without that? Well, I'm going to go on event begin play. So whenever the ball is sort of, spawned into the world, I'm going to drag off. Actually, I'm going to go down here and I'm going to do set, and then I'm going to drag off and connect that here. So now we can set this, but what are we going to set it to? We need something in between that. I'm going to get all actors of class. Now this is kind of an expensive node because if you have say 100,000 trees and you get all the actors of that 100,000 trees class, that's kind of a problem. If you were creating a game that you could sort of had more than one character, you could always manage the characters that way, or manage your characters in whatever way you set up. But this is a quick and dirty way to get the reference to the character, especially if you only have one or two. It's whatever, this isn't really that expensive because what it's going to do is get all actors of a specific class and create an array out of those, and then we're going to set it to the first value. So here what I'm going to do is take the actor class of third person character, which is our character. I'm going to get the array out, and I'm going to do what's called get a copy. If you literally type in get a copy, this is going to give me back a copy of the third person character object reference that is at position 0 in this array. And since we only have one person in the scene, we only have one of them, then the only thing that will be in this array will be this character, which will be 0, and we can set that to that. So now anytime, if I take this to be not public, we can see that the game will still work because I have set that variable on begin play, which is pretty cool. So it should function exactly the same way as it did before, but now instead of setting the variable in a public sense, I'm going to set it through nodes at sort of, at the beginning, which is cool beans. So now that's set up to be spawnable, which is good. And now what we're going to do is sort of set up our goals, because any good soccer game is obviously going to need some goals so that we actually know when we score. And what we're going to do is add a component, and I'm going to do, okay, sorry, let me slow down. I went over to BP goals, so if you didn't have that open, it should be just in your default content folder, which is where I've been creating everything. And I'm going to go to my BP goals, and I'm going to go to the viewport, and in the top left, I'm going to click on add component, and then click on box collision. Oop, there we go. Oh, jeez, struggling. Box collision. Now I'm going to take that box, I'm going to make sure it's under the default scene root, so I'm going to attach it there, and I'm going to click here and then that box is already over at this goal, which is kind of nice. And I'm going to rotate it. It doesn't have to be rotated because I can just scale it, so I'm just going to scale her up a little bit. All my axes are really weird. There we go. So this should actually happen the way I think it. So this little button, again, it just cycles between world and local transform. I switched to local transform so that all the axes were in the right direction, so I could just grab the handles and just affect their sort of position. And then I'm going to rename this. Let's see, which side are we on right now? This is away goal, so I'm going to name this. Let's see, what do we want to name this? Sure, away collision. That's fine. Away collision. Collision. There we go. And then I'm going to make a new one. So I'm going to hit Control C and V. And then I'm going to do home collision. There we go. And then I'm going to pop that home collision. It's going to drag that right on it over. Cool. So there we go. I now have two sort of colliders here. I have a home goal, and I can know this is the home goal because I can click on it and see. So this is the home goal collision, and then over here we have the away collision. So we've added our collisions. Now we're going to need to add some variables to actually hold our score in this blueprint. So I'm going to go over to the event graph. Don't need to be in the event graph to create variables, but we're going to get into the graph in a second. I'm going to hit add a variable, and I'm going to do home score, and this is going to be a integer. I'm going to hit compile so that I can see that's at 0, and then I'm going to hit Control W to duplicate, and then this is going to be away score. Just like that. And I hit compile, and there we go. Now we have two variables here. One to hold each of the scores, and then we're going to create a series of print statements to sort of display the score. So let's go up to event begin play because we want to know what the score is when we start the game, right? We're going to print first the away score. So I'm going to grab this. I'm going to say get, and then I'm going to do this and print. Of course, it won't show up because I'm a dummy. Do print string like this, and then when you just drag this in, it will convert between a integer and a string for you, which is nice. And then I'm going to print this string. The reason I'm printing this first is because the way that it prints, it will print like sort of 1, 2, 3, 4, but it will actually be 1, 2, 3, 4 because it will print this first and then the next thing. And you'll see in a second why I did it in this order. But first you're going to print the away score, and then we're going to print another string like this. And this is going to say away score like that, And then I'm just going to duplicate all this stuff like this. And then I'm going to change this to, away score or home score like that. I'm going to go and grab my home score, get my home score, and drag it into here. So now this is just sort of what my line looks like. And then I'm going to hit the play button, and then we can see in the top left it prints home and away score, right away right here, which is cool. So now we know that. But this seems like something we're going to use a couple times, right? Because we're going to actually need to print the score anytime somebody scores. So we'd wind up just duplicating this line of code a bunch of times. So instead of duplicating it, I'll just create a function. So if I come over down here to the left, I can go down to functions here, and I can hit create function, and then I can say print score. You can tell you're in a function because this start node is purple, and you can see that we're still in our BP goals, but we've added a new tab here to our blueprint. So here's the event graph, and right next to that is print score. And I'm just going to copy and paste all of this stuff. So Control C, and then I'm going to come here. Let's hit Control V, and then I am just going to plug this in here. And now when we call this function, it will print the score just the same way that we had before, which is awesome. And then I'm just going to delete all of this stuff because we don't need it anymore. And then I'm just going to grab print score from the left here. I'm just going to grab print score, drag it in, and plug it into event begin play. And now when we hit play, you can see the same thing happen. So it's the same thing because we're essentially running the same line of code, just condensed. And now we have this nice function to call every single time something happens. So that's cool. Now what we're going to do is create some overlap events for the goals. So we have our box collisions right here, but if we just let them be like we did before, or if we go down here to the bottom and we do on component begin overlap, which is what we want right here. So I'm going to hit the plus button. And then, so this is the home goal. We can see that because it says home collision right here. I'm going to drag this back over. So on component begin overlap, we want to test the other actor, right? We want to say get class. And then we want to, our class is child of. And then I'm going to go down to my parent class here, and I'm going to type in BP underscore ball. And so now we're testing to see if it is the ball, in fact, that has hit the box. And then I'm going to do a branch out of this return value. And now we can see, we can test whether or not it is, in fact, the ball that has gone into our goal. And we actually need to do the same thing with the away, not the away score, the away collision right here. So I'm going to drag this back over. Scroll down, on component begin overlap. I can literally just copy this. But now I'm going to take in this other actor and plug this in here. And there we go. So now we have the away goal and the home goal set up to understand if it is in fact the ball that has hit it. Let's see, what's next? We have set up the overlap events. So what's going to happen when the ball actually is hit, right? What we're going to do is then, if it is the home goal that got hit, I'm going to take this home score, and I'm going to get home score, and I'm going to type in plus plus, and then that'll increment that integer. So what is an increment? An increment will take the previous number that home score was and add 1 to it and then reset it all in one nice little package. So that's cool. And then I'm going to do the same thing down here for the away score. So I'm going to get away score, drag out, type in plus plus, and then go to increment integer, and then true. And then I want to reprint the score, right, after every time somebody scores. So I'm going to get this print score, and then I can drag both of these into here. And now we can test that. So let's hit the play button. We have a ball here, right? And then I kick the ball. And then it says home score 1, away score 0. So now I know that that's the home goal, and then I can kick. Oh, come back, ball. There we go. Let's get it out of the corner. And then let's stop rolling. Kick it. Ah, just missed. Boop. And now it says away score 1. So now we know that our our functionality is set up correctly, I could lob the ball over there. Oh, that was a heck of a kick out of this guy. He's going pro next year. I've already signed him up. His mom got him his jersey. And then so if I come back over here and I kick the ball into the net, then it says home score 2, and you can sort of see that sort of start firing down in the blueprints too. So that's great. Now we have a score system that will actually print the score and everything, and we have variables that are holding those values. So that's awesome. But this is kind of funny because it's like if it's a cool game, I don't really want to like run and get the ball every time, right? If I kick the ball in the net, I kind of want it to spawn a new one. So how do we do that? I'm going to, after I print the score, I'm going to spawn from class, spawn actor from class. There it is. And I'm going to spawn a BP underscore ball. And then I'm going to, the other thing that you need to put in here is a make transform. And then you can plug that into spawn transform. If you wanted to spawn it at a specific location, you could get the transform of another actor in the scene. So like, for example, I could just take BP goals and then say like, I could get like a self-reference or I guess here, default scene root, and then get transform, and then just plug this in, and since this is at 0, 0, 0, it will actually do the same thing. But yeah, I mean, if you could do that, but you could also just make your own transform. Say you wanted to like be very specific about where you wanted this to sort of spawn, we could just do this and then do 500. So the reason I'm putting in 500 in the Z is so that it spawns up above the ground and then falls down. So that way it doesn't actually spawn in the ground or like freak out. But what would happen here is we'd have too many balls, right? We don't want that. We actually want just the one ball at a time. But how do we get rid of the other one? Well, I'm going to take the other actor here, and I'm going to do destroy actor. So now the ball is going to hit. I'm going to get a reference to that ball, and I'm going to destroy it. And I'm going to do that here before I get to printing the score. Boop. And then same thing up top. I'm going to plug in here before I print the score and take the other actor here. And then we can hit the play button. And then what happens? Well, I kick the ball. Ball goes in the net, gets destroyed, and it spawns a new one for me right at the middle. Boop. So that's cool. So now we actually have a game that kind of functions. We actually can see that like a new ball gets dropped, which is nice. I'm just gonna yoink this just right in. Oh man. But you guys get the point, right? Like it's basically going to spawn a new ball every time I kick it into the goal, which is nice. So there you go. That's how we would do something like that. But this is cool and this is an easy way to do it, but I know like what my score is, or should I if I wanted to like do something crazy and have a new ball spawner blueprint, like we could do that. So I'm actually going to do that just to show you guys, like obviously this functions, but I'm going to show you guys a way to create a BP ball spawner, so that if you wanted to do something crazy, like say you wanted to like spawn 4 balls in the middle of the game so you could kick 4 in or whatever. We're not actually going to do that, but that might be a reason that you might want a separate blueprint for your ball spawner and not spawn the ball from a specific like blueprint like this. So we're going to do that, and we're going to talk a little bit more too about sending events back and forth between blueprints. So what I'm going to do now is create a new blueprint. It's an actor called BP Ball Spawner. And BB's Ball Spawner is going to do exactly what it sounds. It's just going to basically spawn balls, which is cool. But I'm going to create a custom event in my new BP Ball Spawner. So I'm going to type in custom, and then the first thing that shows up is add custom event, and hit enter. And I'm going to call this spawn ball. And then I'm going, oh, you guys can't probably see the edge of that, but here you go. So spawn ball, and then on the inputs here, so I've calling and creating a custom event. So just like event begin play or event actor begin overlap or event tick, these are just ways to sort of fire off events that you want to have happen, right? It's kind of like a function, but really what we're doing is calling a line of blueprints in the event graph and not contained in the function. So this is kind of like big level thinking here. But what I want to do is, I want a score limit. So I want to, when I spawn a new ball, I want to test to see whether or not the score has been reached, right? Like if it's 3 or more, right, it should be game over. And so I'm going to test some of that, but I need to get into this blueprint in some fashion, right? The values of home and away score. So one way I could do that is take a reference to BP goals, just like we did before with the character, and create a variable here, but that's kind of long form and kind of annoying. Like I don't need a reference to BP goals. Right now anyway, I just need to get in those values. And so right here under inputs, if I've selected on this custom event, I can then hit input. And this creates a pin here, and so this pin will allow me to send information sort of quickly between locations without needing a reference to anything. So that's cool. So I'm going to call this home score ref, or I'll just call it home score for now. And then I'm going to make sure that this is an integer. I'm going to add a new one. This is going to be away score, which is also an integer. And I'm going to hit compile and save, and then I'm going to execute a branch here. And I'm going to drag out the home score and type in a less than, so integer, and I'm going to just do 3. And then that goes into the blueprint or the branch here. So if home score is less than 3 is what this branch is asking. And then down here, I'm going to do another less than and do a branch. So if home score is less than 3, yes, then we should check to see if the away score is less than 3. And if that's true, then we spawn a ball. So spawn actor of from class. And then here we can do BP ball. And then the spawn transform will be just a right click, make transform. And then I'm going to set the Z value up to 600 so that it's up in the sky a little bit, and then we'll fall down to the ground. And so here we go. If the score is less than everything, right, less than 3 for either of our teams, then we will say that we will spawn a new ball. Otherwise, if this returns false, then we know that the home score is 3 or greater, which should be 3. And that means sort of the game has been finished, right? If this returns false, then the game is finished. Otherwise, we should spawn a ball because the game should still be going because we haven't actually reached our 3 sort of goal yet, right? So now we're going to create sort of 3 string prints onto our false statement here. So first we need to print string. I'm just going to do game over. And then I'm going to do another one. And I'm going to say home team wins. Alright, great. So now we can see that the game should be over and the home team should win. And then here I'll do the same thing here, and I'm going to do false, but this is the away team. Great. And then this is set up pretty nicely. We can check this to make sure that it works real fast, but we have not actually called this event in any fashion here, nor do we have a reference to our ball spawner. So first I'm going to create a variable here called ball spawner ref. Ref is just for reference. And then I'm going to, for the type, I'm going to do BP underscore ball spawner. On an object reference, and this one I am going to make public because we're never going to spawn a new ball spawner. And then I can go here over to goals. And then now I can see that I have this new property available to me, ball spawner ref. We don't have one yet because I haven't actually placed one. So let's place a ball spawner into our scene. We'll put it to 0, 0, and then I will move it up in the scene. Let's see. I'll move it up a little bit so that we can know that this is the ball spawner. And now we have a reference to it, which means we can go back to our goals. Or we actually have one in the scene, so we can go back, click back on our BP goals. We can see this value still here, ball spawner ref, and then click on that, and then we can fill that in. So that's nice because now we have a reference to that. So we can come back to BP goals here, and after we print our score, we can then drag out a ball spawner ref and get that, and then we can call spawn ball. Now you can see that when we call this event, normally there wouldn't be anything here except for the target, which is the specific ball spawner ref that we want to access and call this function in. But here we can see we created those inputs, home score and away score. So that's pretty nice because I can just drag in and, oh, not set. I can just drag in and say get home score, and then I can drag in here and get away score. And then now it's just real easy because now every single time those values will just come in. So that's nice. And I can hit the play button. And then now we should be able to, oh goodness gracious, let's not do that. We should be able to now kick the ball. Woo, smoked it. Kick the ball once. So there's home score 1. Kick the ball twice, home score 2. Kick the ball 3 times. And then see, we can see it now says game over and home team wins. So we know that that check is working correctly. So that's cool, but we can't really continue the way that we are going, because if we do, then the score would continue going up for forever and ever, which we definitely don't want to have happen. So we need to do something to our BP goals, right? We need to be able to reset when we have the game over. The variables and things that we have in there. So I'm going to go back to BP goals. I'm going to create a new custom event here by typing in custom, and then I'm just going to rename this game over event. And now what happens on game over event? Well, I would like to set home score and set away score to 0. So let's do that. And then I'm also going to print, I'm going to print in here new game. And just for nice sake, I'm going to put a delay in here. And the reason I'm going to put a delay in here is so that it doesn't immediately happen that we start a new game when the game is over. It will delete that previous ball, right? It's going to delete it. Call spawn ball. Spawn ball won't happen because it will deter or direct it down to game over event when the score is high enough. And then I will do a spawn ball here. Oh, can't because I don't have a reference to ball spawner. So let's get ball spawner, and then we are going to spawn ball. So now what will happen when the game is over is we will reset everything to 0. The variables to 0, so the score resets. I will print a string that says new game, so we know that the new game has begun, and then I will spawn a new ball. And home score and away score are just going to be whatever we set them to here. And then yeah, so that's looking good. But the problem is we haven't actually called that event, right? Like ball spawner, we need to call that event here to call game over. So we need a variable back to the BP, we'll call this goals ref. And then here I'll type in BP goals, and I want an object reference. And I want that to be a public variable so that when I can come in here to ball spawner, I have this default node here, and then I can just click on BP goals, hit save, and then I'll save everything in here. And now we can hit play. We should be able to run over here. I don't know why that happens every once in a while. Doop. So we scored once with the home team. I don't know why it's doing that. There we go. We scored twice. We'll do a lob kick this time. Boop. Oh my goodness. Boop. Oh my gosh. I've become a streamer. Alright, here we go. Oh, I don't know what happens. There we go. So this home team wins. There's no ball in the scene. And then we wait 3 seconds, and then nothing happens. Why did nothing happen? Well, let's see what happened. Oh, we never actually called the event. We made the reference and then never actually called the event, so that's funny. So here we can go and do goals ref and then game over event and then actually call that. That would be nice, wouldn't it? And then we could do that actually in either location. So if we want to really make it simple, we could just drag this over, and either of these will lead to game over event. And then now we have a working game. So let's come over here, a lob kick, off the post again. Oh my goodness. There we go. Boop. So we scored 1 with the home team. Scored twice with the home team. So on the next one it should say game over, which it did last time, but what we are really looking for is it to delay, home team wins, new game, and the ball drops in. So there you go. That is sort of the whole game. I can press the space bar because that's sort of built-in functionality to jump over the ball if I want to. And then, I can hold shift and, lob that shit wherever I want it to go. But that is it, guys. That's sort of the way to create this really simple game. And also we have started discussing, communicating between blueprints, which is essential if you're ever going to build any sort of functionality into your VR content, which is pretty essential, especially with all the different interactions that, blueprint content, or not blueprint, but VR content is asking for these days with different menus, and things like that. So that's a huge step forward for you guys. Took me forever to learn all this stuff, so I'm glad that I can get you guys a little bit hour and something tutorial. And sort of learn all this stuff. We learned all this stuff from documentation. So if you have any questions about stuff, there's all this stuff's in documentation. Feel free to reach out to us. And to discuss your assignment for the week, we will also be posting this obviously on my courses, but the assignment for the week is to do exactly this, which is basically follow this tutorial and create this little game. We're just going to be testing them. So to submit, since you don't have any custom things, we just want you to sort of duplicate this. You can add more if you would like to challenge yourself. And if you want to test anything or try anything out, you can always add more, but this is sort of what we're looking for in terms of the assignment this week. So printing the score and making sure the score actually functions, that when I kick it in both goals that we get different values and things like that, so the values go up, and that when you score 3 or whatever value you want, preferably 3 so I don't have to score too many times, because you can see how bad I am at this, that it will reset itself and sort of hit a game over event, and then also to have this sort of shift functionality. So if anybody has any questions, please let us know. I hope this tutorial was informative and helpful. Again, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out to us, and I will talk to you guys, probably never, but you can always ask us questions, so I'll talk to you guys at some point. Alright, bye.